All right, here we are. You are live. We are live. You are looking live. Eric Messersmith, the great Eric Messersmith. I am Charlie Marlow. This is Everybody Settle Down. 6 days from the election. Eric, everybody's talking about garbage. Who's more garbage? Were these jokes? Who's the most garbagey? And I said, you know what? We're both garbage humans. So we'll call this garbage talk or garbage time because we're both former sports people. At the end of the game, this is when I used to play. The only time I used to ever play in basketball in high school was garbage time. I had to be either my team had to be up 20-ish or down 20-ish. That's when I got in the game my junior year of basketball. It was garbage time. So this is an episode. We'll call it garbage time. How you doing?
Well, I'm sure that was for political reasons because you should have been starting. We all know that.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Yes, you're right.
Look, it's so funny. We were waiting for the October surprise, and we thought, well, maybe like Israel and Iran will go to war, and that didn't really happen, at least not yet. Or, there would be some other major event like a Hunter Biden laptop thing, or Jim Comey announcing he was going to reopen the investigation to Hillary. But it turned out it might just be a comedian at a Trump speech making a joke about Puerto Rico, and then Joe Biden once again stepping in it in response and at the worst possible time.
Okay, so let's start there. We got all kinds of polls. We got the odds. Everything's crazy. But let's start with the Tony Hinchcliffe, because that's where this garbage narrative started. And then, of course, Joe Biden stepped in it. So before we did this show, I had to make sure I wanted to go watch the entirety of Tony Hinchcliffe's comments, his little stand-up routine. And I think it was, 11 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it was. So I watched all of it yesterday. By the way, I like Tony Hinchcliffe. I think he's very funny. I like that style and sense of humor. I like the racial humor, okay? I like the Dave Chappelle stuff. I like the Bill Burr stuff. That type of humor is up my alley, okay? And I'm not offended by it. I get it. That's kind of his thing. He makes fun of everybody. If you watch the Tom Brady roast, he was a part of that. He was crushing everybody, Tom Brady, Kim Kardashian, and all that. So I just want everybody to know, I am not offended in any way, shape, or form. But at this point in the election, why would you give the other side any ammo? And it's just kind of an odd pairing is what I'm saying. So again, I'm not offended, but to have an insult comic at a big rally right before the election where he can piss a lot of people off, what's the value in that, I guess, is my question, Eric.
Yeah, what's the upside? Look, I totally agree with what you said. That's my kind of humor too. I've heard other clips of this guy, and he is funny. Like if you heard him at the Tom Brady roast, he said some really offensive things, but the jokes hit. They were funny. Part of his problem was that really wasn't a good joke. It wasn't. And so that was part of the issue. But the bigger issue was time and place. Like what you or I like in comedy at a comedy club or on a roast is different than at a rally, not just any rally, but maybe the signature rally of this cycle for Trump at Madison Square Garden. Well, they have 20,000 people. I mean, everybody was there. Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson. Hell, they even dusted off Melania to make an appearance for this thing. This was a huge event for him. And the headline should have been Trump draws 20,000 in the heart of Manhattan, this liberal bastion a week before the election gives his closing argument. Instead, it was some of the insulting things that were said, not just by him, but by other speakers too, about Harris, but his line about Puerto Rico, and obviously was the one that caught fire. And even though I may not be offended, or you may not be offended, the question is, were Puerto Ricans offended and were Hispanics offended? And the answer to that, I think if you've seen a lot of posts on social media, is yes, right? Now, will that move votes? I don't know. Most people were locked in. But as somebody pointed out the other day, there's over 400,000 Puerto Ricans that live in Pennsylvania. Now, not all of them are probably registered to vote or 18, but many are, right? And if the margins are as close as we think they are, maybe a couple 100,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania could make the difference. And so I think it was just incredibly stupid. Why even have him at all? And then if you are going to have him, because you know or should know what he does, what his style is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are going to have him, it needs to be vetted to the word. Like he needs to submit every joke exactly to the letters he's going to tell it, and then you got to trust he's going to stick to that, and you approve it ahead of time. And so that was just incredibly dumb a week and a half before the election. Will it matter? I normally would say not, definitely not, right? But because this is so close, it's kind of been my theme all year. When it's this close, everything matters. Everything.
Okay, couple things. First of all, now Hinchcliffe is a comedian, but he does Kill Tony, which is a big live show podcast. I love that this is the podcast election, basically. And I love that a lot of these political figures, people running for president, are sitting down with these comedians. I watched Trump on Andrew Schultz, Flagrant podcast. I watched JD Vance on Theo Vaughn. I think it was last week or the week before, where, I mean, Theo Vaughn makes this comment about, they were talking about the opioid crisis and how all these people are dying, then also fentanyl. And Theo Vaughn makes this comment. He's like, you can't even do cocaine anymore in America. And it was just like so funny because there's the vice presidential candidate, and JD Vance laughed. It's actually a really good podcast. But I just think it's so funny because it is really awkward when the people that maybe are swaying this election media-wise are stand-up comedians, whether it's Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, Theo Vaughn, Tony Hinchcliffe. It's really, really funny. So basically, Hinchcliffe goes up there with his garbage comment, and then Joe Biden steps in it last night, whenever that was. And Joe Biden, here's the deal. And I'm not just giving Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt. I think most people agree that Joe Biden misspoke. Did he really mean to say that? No, but he can't talk, right? Like he's at the point where he's a liability every time he's in front of a microphone. Like he for the betterment of the Democrats needs to just stop talking. So, I mean, you tell me. I don't think Biden, of course, meant that all the supporters were garbage, but he's stuttering, he's stammering, he can't get a word out. That's essentially what Joe Biden is at this point in his life. So every time he goes out there, he's going to say something really silly. And look, in the same way that I don't think Hillary really meant that everybody was a deplorable, look, in the political game, you have to use this. So, of course, every right-wing media person and pundit and every politician is saying that Joe Biden called all Trump supporters garbage. You have to use that. Did he really mean that? No, but like at this point, Joe Biden, every time he goes out there, steps in something. It's just the way he is. Like he can't really perform anymore. Let's be real.
Right, which is why he's not the candidate and why the Harris campaign has smartly sidelined him. There was reporting this week, I think it was Axios, that Biden and the White House had left dates open for him to campaign, and they had come and passed without the Harris campaign being like, oh, yeah, come on out, let's use you. So he's been used very sparingly on the campaign trail, and you see why. I mean, this is why the guy can't be the candidate. I agree with you. Look, he didn't – it's a little bit different than Hillary because Hillary did mean that some supporters of Trump are deplorable.
Yes,
she didn't mean they all were. That was false. She clearly was talking about some of them. She meant people who are racist, blah, blah, blah. But she literally meant they're deplorable, some of these Trump supporters. Biden was clearly, if you read the transcript, here's the transcript. He said, quote, just the other day, a speaker at the rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or a Puerto Rico who I'm from in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done, everything we've been. First of all, that's a word salad, and he stepped
today,
that.
Junior.
Right, but he clearly meant Hinchcliffe specifically as garbage, right? Not all Trump supporters. But that doesn't really matter because it's how people can spin it. It's what gets out there. And he's so bad at this point that it's become such a liability for the Harris campaign that they've smartly sidelined him. And look, this is a topic probably to get in depth to after the election. But if Harris loses, Biden is the main person that should be blamed, not Harris, because Biden set this party up, if they blow this, if they lose to Trump, to fail by hanging on too long. It's the classic story of the older person. We've all seen it in business. We've seen it maybe with our parents or grandparents, people who just hold on too long. And that's what Biden did. And if they lose, it's going to, rightfully so, mar his legacy of what otherwise was a pretty productive 4-year stretch in terms of accomplishing lasting, meaningful pieces of legislation, guiding our economy. I mean, more economic data came out today. The GDP is up, inflation down again, almost to 2%. Like we did the soft landing. We did what nobody thought we could do, which is recover from COVID economically better than almost any country in the world, bring down high inflation without a recession, low unemployment, stock market record highs. Look, I want to be clear. The president gets too much credit when things are good economically and too much blame when they're bad, but it's his watch. And the fact that all of that happened, right? It's been, I think, a successful presidency, but he tried to hang on too long and run until he was 86 years old and only left, let's be honest, like, yes, he gets some credit for bowing out, but he was pushed. He was pushed by Nancy Pelosi and others. And so if they then lose because he left the party in such a terrible position, I mean, it will forever mar his legacy, and rightfully so. When you're that old, you have a responsibility. If you can't make the decision about when to go, you need to get it out of your hands and have other people you trust make that decision for you. So that will be a thing to watch. And conversely, if Harris wins, she will have bailed out to some degree, I think, Biden's legacy by getting a victory that's pretty impressive if she can pull it out.
See, I agree with you on that. Now, this is a topic for another show later, but I do think it's interesting because I disagree with how Biden will be looked at. Now, I'm just saying, I agree, I disagree, I agree, I disagree. I agree with almost everything you said, but that's not how it's going to be perceived. Because here's what's going to happen. Let's just say if Trump wins 10, 20 years from now, because by the way, I think the economy is only going to improve as we get further and further away from COVID. I said this a couple years ago. So this is nothing about, I don't even know who's going to win. But I said whoever's president after Biden is going to have a great canvas to work with because we're going to be 4 years removed from all of the craziness of COVID and all the spending, all the inflation will have died down. So if Trump wins, even though Biden passed all of these acts and whatnot, you're not going to feel those for years from now. Trump will actually get credit for that. So I think what will happen is I think Biden will be remembered as a really bad president. Because again, think about 10 years from now. You're going to think of how great things were before COVID. For whatever reason, Donald Trump has been able to skate from COVID and not be blamed at all. So then when things got bad inflation-wise, you're going to only blame Biden. And by the time Trump comes in or whoever, even if it's Kamala, like the inflation is going to go down and down and down. Like 2-3 years from now, I don't think we're going to be talking about it. So especially if Trump
I don't
wins,
think we're going to be talking about it in 6 months.
Okay. I hope that's true. Although I told you my HOA numbers, they're going sky high. And those never go down, by the way. I've never seen an HOA fee ever go down. I've only seen it go up. But just in conclusion, if Trump wins, I think Joe Biden will be looked upon by a lot of people as not being a good president at all.
Which is crazy because, like I said before, presidents get too much blame and too much credit. But we've just accepted this, that Trump gets credit for the economy his first 3 years, right? But by the way, compare the last 3 years of Obama's term to the first 3 years of Trump's term. And I saw you just highlighted a comment. People are asking for predictions. I've got some, so we'll get there. I want to give
me too.
So if you compare GDP, job growth, last 3 years of Obama, first 3 years of Trump, they're almost identical. In fact, Obama had more job growth per month, right? So Trump inherited an economy that was already clicking along, and then it continued to click along, okay? I'm not saying he gets no credit for that. I'm just saying let's be fair. And so if you're going to give him credit for that, how can you not give Joe Biden credit for taking over an economy, some credit, that was in tatters because of COVID, to be fair, when he came in, and now 4 years later, GDP growth, real GDP growth, not only is at 3%, which is pretty good, it's higher than it was projected to be pre-COVID. In early 2020, what was the projection of what it would be by now? We're above that. We are above labor force participation for prime age workers, what we were pre-COVID. All of this done, by the way, with lowering inflation back down to 2%. We're basically there. We're basically at the Fed's goal of 2% without a recession. So you're right, though. What's going to happen? We know. Let's say Trump wins. He's going to come into office, and all of a sudden, he's going to talk about how great the economy is, right? Nothing will have really changed. We'll just be a few months further down the road of the path we're already on. But he'll take credit for all these things that right now he's bashing. Low inflation, low unemployment, strong economic growth, all of these things, record highs in the stock market that are happening now. He will turn around and take credit. You know what's going to happen? A lot of his supporters will now change their view and say, oh, yeah, the economy's pretty good now. That's kind of the tribal politics we're in. And I get it, but I just think we should call it out about how ridiculous it is and how much Trump would benefit from some pretty amazing luck, if he does win in terms of the economy.
Okay, so I did my research. I watched all the Hinchcliffe, but I didn't watch a ton of that Madison Square Garden rally. I mean, was it all day long? Was it like 6 to 8 hours? I mean, how long did it last?
I didn't tune in, but yeah, it was quite a long time. I mean, there were a lot of speakers. They even had Rudy Giuliani up there speaking.
Was his hair dye? Was it going down his cheek again? Like,
I don't know. You talk about like Rudy Giuliani's the poster child for of Trump's quote unquote loyalty. Like Rudy Giuliani's given up everything, his reputation. He just got sued by Georgia election workers, and they ruled the other day he has to give up his apartment, all his assets, including like signed baseballs. He's got to give it all. Like he gave everything for Trump, and Trump wouldn't even pay all of his legal bills.
Okay, so by the way, Rudy Giuliani at this point in his life, he reminds me of the Penguin from the Batman movies, especially the Danny DeVito Penguin, remember? Was that Batman Returns or Batman Forever, whatever it was? Anyway, that's not really important. But I did last night. So before bed, I could not go to sleep last night. I think it's because I worked out late, like super late at night. So I could not fall asleep. So I was going to watch the Kamala speech today. I watched it last night. 30 minutes, whatever it was. I thought it was good. I thought it was unifying. I mean, I can't remember anything that really sticks out besides she did say, and this is kind of her closing argument, that she's going to be a president for everybody. So she reached out to Trump supporters. And look, maybe you and I disagree on this, but I'm going to stick to my guns on this. I've said this whole time that I think Donald Trump would win this election in a landslide if he didn't try to overturn the election in 2020 and January 6th and all that fake electors plot. I think Donald Trump would win this in a landslide if that didn't happen. So I'm going to stick to my guns saying it is smart to symbolically be there where the rally was January 6th and show people the difference, because this is, to me, I think that was a red line for a lot of moderates. And if Trump loses, I think that's the main reason. Maybe I'm wrong on that. So I was okay with that messaging and that tenor and that kind of being the imagery of how different Kamala was last night than 4 years ago with January 6th. What do you think?
Well, in terms of your point about Trump and January 6th, I think, yeah, like say we imagined an alternate reality where he just conceded the election like the night of or a few days later, where would we be now? I think he'd be more of a favorite. Like right now, the election models have him at like 52, 53%. I think he'd be maybe a 60-40 favorite, but I don't think it would be overwhelming. I think he'd be a more solid favorite, but I just think we are in such a time. I mean, you remember the argument, just get rid of Biden and the Democrats will cruise. Well, we saw that. And what's happening? No, we're right back to basically where we were early in the year with Biden as the candidate pre his debate debacle, which is a coin flip. And so I think we are so divided and so polarized. I don't know if it would have mattered. Also, another point on that, I can't imagine a world where Trump doesn't do that, because that would mean Trump isn't who he is at his core. Do you know what I mean? That's like, That's like saying, I don't know, Superman couldn't fly. Like, it's just Batman wouldn't fight crime. Like, that's who Trump is. So of course he was going to contest the election. Like, so basically what you're saying is, well, if Trump had a completely different personality and didn't say and do a lot of the things he did, then he'd be fine. And I agree with you. That's true. But in order to change that, he would have to be fundamentally a different person. You see what I'm saying? Like, because it was always destined he was going to do that, given his issues, let's say.
It's crazy.
See what I'm saying? I can't separate the two things.
No, you're right. But, that's probably what makes Trump a good politician. But in the end, listen, man, I understand the economy is important and inflation and all that. But like at your core, you have to be able to admit when you lose, right? And the whole peaceful transfer of power thing, that was big to me. And I think that was big to a lot of people. 250 years, like that's what separated us from other countries. Even if you don't like the person, you go to the inauguration, you shake hands, you move on. That was American democracy. And I just think it was a travesty what happened, not just January 6th, but the fake electors plot. I know a lot of people don't even know about that. They always focus on January 6th. But you're probably right. There's no world where Donald Trump is ever going to admit he loses. And same with this election. Like, we all know that. And Democrats, by the way, if Democrats lose, they will bitch and complain. Watch, they'll probably talk about people being purged from voter rolls and whatnot. But it'll be different. It'll be different than the reaction if Trump loses, which, by the way, they're already starting with that.
Absolutely.
Like, that's where we're going to do our predictions. I like to read the tea leaves. Why is everybody on the right, from a media standpoint, already focusing on fraud? To me, that's almost you're laying the groundwork for the fact you think you're going to lose and to start fighting it.
Yeah, I want to get back to the Harris strategy point in a minute, but to point to what you just said, MAGA world has already basically decided, if you follow it on X, there are only two possibilities: Trump wins or the election is stolen. Right. They don't even really acknowledge what is a close to 50% proposition, if not better, that Harris could just win. And that clearly they're setting the groundwork. I mean, Trump on Truth Social today, this is from this morning, Pennsylvania is cheating and getting caught at large scale levels rarely seen before, then in all caps. Report cheating to authorities. Law enforcement must act now. I mean, that is complete nonsense. There is no cheating in Pennsylvania. There's not even really any credible allegations of anything untoward at all in Pennsylvania right now, just like there wasn't in 2020. But he's starting now, and we know why. I mean, everybody knows this. Even his supporters know this. There is no chance. There is no universe where he concedes a loss if he loses next week. He's going to fight, as he told the people on January 6th, fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore. Yeah, or after he was shot. Like, he is not going to bow out graciously. Let's be honest. He's going to go down kicking and screaming if he goes down. And you're right. On the other side, barring obvious fraud or cheating that like is clear and there is evidence and the courts see it and we all see it, which I think the chances of that are like almost zero. Barring that, the Harris will concede. She will do what Hillary Clinton did, what every president has done, every candidate since we've been alive, even Richard Nixon in 1960, who actually may have had the election stolen. That is one that actually may have really been stolen. And he conceded because he knew, and he talked about this later, there are books written about this. He knew that it would tear the country apart. And that's not who we are as Americans. And he actually may have had the election stolen from him. But on your point, I want to get back to what you said about Harris and the ellipse speech. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched some of it. I've been making this point for a while now. Obviously, you know my feelings on Trump trying to steal the election. The people that believe that are with Harris and have been for a very long time. They were with Biden before that. So I don't mind bringing it up and talking about it. Same thing with the fascism stuff. I think when your former chief of staff, who's a retired 4-star general, comes out and says that the guy I worked with is a fascist, when Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, tells Bob Woodward he's fascist to his core. These are people who don't usually get involved in elections, right? There's kind of a tradition. Military stays out of it. For them to weigh in, that's a big deal. And I think it's fine to point it out. I think it's fine to do the speech at the ellipse. My point has been for Harris and Biden before that, don't make that the crux of your argument. Not because it's not important, not because it's not true, but because it's strategy to try to win. And a Democratic super PAC came out this week with actual data to back up what I'm saying. They had swing voters in the swing states watch different messaging and scored how they responded to it. And the messaging that moved them the most were messages that compared and contrasted the economic policies of Harris. Harris fights for the middle class. Trump, supports tax cuts that benefit mainly the rich. Obamacare, things like that. Those kind of arguments, right? Less effective, much less, were the claims about fascism or about trying to overturn the election. It's not that those things aren't necessarily true or you shouldn't talk about them. It's just, what are you going to, you only have so much oxygen. You only have so much time to get your point across. And so I was okay even with Harris doing the speech from the ellipse. What I was afraid was going to happen is that because she was there on the spot that Trump gave that speech on January 6th, that she would make that the center point of that speech, of kind of her big closing argument speech. So I was happy to see that when I listened to the speech, most of it was focused on a compare and contrast of what she would do versus what Trump would do, in talking about her economic policies, the child tax credit, giving more money back to working families, money for people buying a home for the first time, money to help people through Medicare who care for an older relative. Those kinds of things, those specific policies, and contrasting them with what Trump might do, that to me was really smart. I mean, that's one thing Biden, when he was right in 2020, that's what he was really good at. And pretty much his whole career. He just understood, Democrats help the middle class, Republicans help the rich. I'm going to frame that in an effective way. And Biden was really good at that. And in fact, I remember there was one anecdote where this was in somebody's book, where during you remember those Democratic primary debates in 2020, they had like 10 candidates, right? And Biden wasn't doing well early in that process. And Pete Buttigieg was standing beside Biden on one of the debate stages. You know how they come out and they get a blank piece of paper and a notepad, a pen? And so they come out and they're furiously writing down their notes, right, about what they're going to say. Buttigieg comes out and he's writing all these notes about what he's going to say right before the debate starts. And he looks over at Biden, and Biden wrote on his pad one thing: middle class. That's all he wrote. He just wrote it a few times over and over again. And Buttigieg was like, that's a boss move. Like, here's Buttigieg trying to remember all. But look, that's Biden just knew it in his gut. And he could, back then, he could communicate it effectively. He obviously has lost that ability since. And so that is right, I know, right? Surprising to us all. At 82 years old, he's not quite the same as what he was. By the way, Donald Trump is 78, will be 82 at the end of a term if he wins it. So I think that message, hitting that, is what I would focus on, is my point. It's not that the other stuff isn't important. It's not that I don't care about it. It's just, what is all that matters now is how do you move those very few swing voters in 7 states? That's all that matters. And that should be, I'm glad to see she was focused on that in her speech. She needs to close with that argument over this last week.
Okay, because you mentioned that, I want to read this funny tweet, or X post, we call it now, that I retweeted earlier. I just thought it was funny. I laughed. It's that SNL, the guys, like the founding fathers, talking about everything. It's pretty funny. But then the caption says, "And every 4 years, we will have suburban housewives in Pennsylvania choose a new president." The guy says, "Just Pennsylvania, sir? And Wisconsin and Michigan, and maybe Arizona as a treat. No one else can vote, sir? They can vote, but it won't matter." And I laughed because, first of all, it's funny, but it also really resonated with me. And I'm not even trying to get in this debate about the Electoral College, but it is pretty crazy that, I mean, I live in Missouri, you live in California, and I'm going to vote for everything. I'm certainly going to vote for senator in Missouri, but like, does it really make sense that only 7 states matter? Like, it's just stupid. And I'm not trying to get into this debate about, abolish the Electoral College, but it is really stupid. It's dumb.
It's incredibly dumb. And look, you and I have done parts of shows on the Electoral College versus the popular vote, so I'm not going to go down that road again. I do want to give our predictions, so stay tuned for that and the latest polling. But I would just say this. One of the arguments that drives me crazy is people say you have to have the Electoral College because if you don't, then the candidates will only spend their time and money in a few places, right? Like large population areas.
Mm-hmm.
Where, if you see the map of where Trump and Harris have been, they are in the same places all the time, talking to the same people, spending all their money in the same states. So literally the argument you were making is exactly the opposite is what is happening. The current system forces the candidates to stay in one place. If they didn't, like, just imagine we had a world where it's a popular vote. They would be everywhere. They would be in California, yes, they would, but they'd be in Texas, they'd be in Florida, they'd be all over the country. And they'd be maybe even in, like, Trump would take a swing through the Dakotas and Wyoming to try to run up the margins there because every vote would count the same. So, yeah, they'd spend a little bit more of their time and money in big population areas, sure, but it would have the exact opposite. It's never going to happen because you have to change the Constitution. But, yeah, you're right. It is dumb, but that's the system we have, and that's, everybody knows the rules. It's a shame that we are in a period where there is such a high probability of Electoral College popular vote splits. That's the issue. For a long time, it didn't matter because they went the same way. Like 2000 was thought of as a fluke. When Gore won the popular vote and Bush won the Electoral College, that was the first time that had happened. It only happened one other time in like 150 years. And then it happened again in 2016. And now there's a very good chance that it's going to happen again next week.
I'll tell you what, though, I just wonder if that's going to swing the other way, though. I could see. I'm not making my prediction that it's going to happen next Tuesday, but if you know that these candidates have known for 4 years that the only states that matter are these 7, and really for the Democrats, 3. Like, couldn't you see a scenario, Eric, where the margins that, let's just say Kamala Harris wins the presidency. I'm not predicting that right now. I may later, but let's just say she wins it. And she wins by only holding the blue wall states. Okay. They've invested all their time, money, resources in those blue wall states. Couldn't you foresee a scenario, if not 2024, maybe 4 years from now, where they start winning California and New York and Illinois by not nearly the same percentage as they used to, right? The Republicans start chipping away at those huge margins, but they hold Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I don't think that's far off. Like, honestly, I mean, Kamala Harris could win this presidency and be damn close to losing the popular vote as long as she performs in Pennsylvania. That wouldn't surprise me that much.
No, it wouldn't. And look, it's very possible that the Electoral College bias that Trump had very strongly in his favor in both 16 and 20 is significantly diminished this year because he does better, like you're saying, in New York and California. And there is some polling to indicate he is going to do better there. So I think it's not a foregone conclusion that the Electoral College is always going to favor Republicans. It does now, but that could switch. And if it does, then the arguments are going to switch, right? Both sides are going to switch their argument about whether Electoral College should go or not. Because let's be honest, what they really care about is winning. No, you and I
won't switch.
Consistent. We both think the Electoral College is garbage, no matter who it favors. Right? I want to see ranked choice voting. I think that would be the best way to do it, but I'll settle for the popular vote. But there's no consistency. It's all about winning. But look, that's the system we have. I will say it's more likely to be Republican, though, because for the same reason the Senate is more likely to be Republican. And that is when you give in smaller individual states more power, then the party that does better in smaller states, less diverse states, which usually they line up, usually the smaller states are less diverse, that party has an advantage. So if the coalition remains the same, which is white rural people voting overwhelmingly Republican, then Republicans will continue to retain some Electoral College advantage. As long as that holds, they will have an advantage because those states are given more power in the Electoral College system. Somebody said, did Biden, I want to run this real quick. Chris Lee 72 said, did Biden sabotage her campaign on purpose? I know right-wing media's been talking about this a lot. I mean, look, the answer to that is no if you've watched Biden this year. Like, did he sabotage his own campaign on purpose at the debate? Did he just decide, you know what? I'm going to go in there and act like I'm old and can't formulate a sentence so I can get forced out of the race and embarrassed and lose my job. I mean, come on. No, it's just, this is a continuing pattern of what we've seen throughout the year. Like, if Biden was totally lucid, like all the time, and then all of a sudden came out and said something that really hurt Harris, then I might buy that argument that he really wants Harris to lose. Like I said, this whole idea that Biden is trying to tank Harris, first of all, I think it's just not true at all for a lot of reasons. First of all, mainly because he agrees with Harris on the issues. Like, even if I don't know what their relationship is, they talk a lot, so I don't know that there's this bad blood people think there is, but even if there is, he agrees with Harris. And here's the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, a Harris win partially saves his legacy because it makes people forget, or at least diminishes the fact that he almost blew this election for his party by trying to hang in there for so long and only leaving when he was forced out. If Harris then ends up losing, that's gone, and everyone's going to blame him, as they rightly should. They will blame him, and he deserves the blame. So he has a lot on the line here. So no, it's not intentional. It's just kind of how he is right now.
On that note, this also really bothers me, this political cycle, and I get it because we're on YouTube, but like the hyperbole of some of these titles and headlines, and everybody, oh, they got destroyed, they got dunked on, Democrats in disarray, Republicans are panicking. Like, I always see these headlines. It's like, this was the worst speech ever. This was the worst word salad. And then I'll watch the speech, and this is, by the way, on both sides, and it'll just be like a normal speech. Like, it won't be that great, but it won't be bad. But it's like, this is the worst thing ever. So I only bring this up because Piers Morgan, who, by the way, his panels on YouTube are really entertaining. They really are. So I saw this tweet earlier. He says, wow, I didn't have Kamala chucking Biden under a massive bus for calling half of America garbage on my presidential race bingo card. So Kamala Harris was asked about the comment, and she responded. I'm like, okay, so what did she say? Kamala basically said, well, the president, I believe he clarified his comment, and I just want everybody to know I strongly disagree with going after anybody's supporters of who you vote for. And it's just like, oh, everybody gets thrown under the bus. Like she literally said, well, I think the president clarified his comments, moved on. We shouldn't go after supporters and the people that vote against you. But it's like, this is part of the problem with the vibes. It's like everything is end of the world. Everything is like, everybody gets thrown under the bus. Everybody's destroyed. I don't know. So let's kind of transition that into the vibes.
Okay.
If you want to give your prediction, polls, whatever's going on, because I think what's really interesting about this election, Eric, is when a week from now we find out who wins, the vibes, were they right? Were they wrong? The polls, because I think there's a lot of bullshit in a lot of the stuff we're seeing here. So what do you think? And I'll get to that.
Oh, I agree. I mean, look, you and I have talked a lot about election betting markets. Let's start there. And I think for a while they did have real value. And I'm not saying they don't have any value now, but if you've read some of the stories that have come out about some of the shenanigans that are going on in these markets, I have a lot less trust in them than I did before. I'm not saying they're not entirely useful for picking up trends, but I trust the polling more and the bet and the forecasting models more now than I do the betting odds, although I still think we can look at both. So betting odds have it 62-38, somewhere around there on the aggregate that Trump, wins. That's better than he's been. But it's kind of stabilized in roughly the 60-40 range. Same thing with the prediction models like Nate Silver's or at 538 where he used to work, or the Hill. They've all kind of stabilized too at around, Trump slight favorite, 52-53%, something like that. A coin flip, basically.
But that's a big difference.
It is a bit.
53,
Harris was ahead.
No, but I'm saying, I'm just looking at it. Something's cooked with the poly market numbers, by the way. Anybody look into that. Like Google poly market and how it's done and who they support and who they basically sponsor. No, what I'm saying though is if you're saying so election betting odds right now are, let's just say 62-38, but if Nate Silver, I haven't looked today, but last I saw was like 53%. That's a big difference. Like 53% is essentially 50-50.
Right. It's
62-38. That's why Trumpers right
almost
now
2 to
think this
1.
thing is over.
Right, because they're looking at the betting markets. I want to be clear. I agree more with the models. I think if you look at the polling, it's really close. A bunch of polling has come out in the last 24 hours. It's not even worth getting into all of it because most of it is what we've seen. Every swing state either tied or one candidate up by a point or two. In fact, Nate Silver posted this the other day. It seems like a lot of these polling companies are doing what's called herding, which is basically putting the thumb on the scale to make the result look more like everybody else. Because if the race were really tied, not every poll would say it was tied because of the way polling works with statistical noise and margin of error. Some polls would have Harris up 4. Some would have Trump up 4, +3 each way. But everything basically in the last 2 days or last week has come in either tied or +1 one way or the other. And so I think that's something to watch. But the one exception to that, because always trust the people that post outliers. It doesn't mean they're right, but it means they're being honest. They're going against the grain, right? By the way, the reason they do this is your reputation is on the line as a polling company. You get graded on these things. And so you have an incentive to not stick your nose out there and be wrong, because then you look like an idiot. Everybody else got it right, and here you were 5 or 6 points different. So trust the outliers. And here's CNN today. CNN poll of the swing states, of the blue wall states. Wisconsin, Harris 51, Trump 45. Harris by 6.
In Wisconsin?
In Wisconsin.
Okay.
Remember, all the toss-up states are basically in the polling averages within 2 points. Most of them are within 1 point. Harris up 6 in Wisconsin. Michigan, Harris 48, Trump 43, Harris by 5. Pennsylvania, Harris 48, Trump 48, a tie. Blue wall states, +6 in Wisconsin, +5 in Michigan. Now, does that mean that poll's right and everybody else is wrong? No, but it does mean trust the outliers. They're at least giving you honest data. Look, so now I'll fold this into my prediction.
Can I just say something real quick, though?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so when you read that, or you read that off and people are listening here, and I'm thinking, okay, that sounds good for Harris, but to me, like, that's kind of what I expect is this Pennsylvania could be so close that, hell, maybe Harris does win Wisconsin, Michigan by 3, 4, 5 points. Maybe it's not nearly as close as we think, but what if she loses Pennsylvania by 30,000 votes? She easily could, and then she loses the presidency.
Well, unless she went. Well, if she loses Pennsylvania, she would have to win
like Nevada and North Carolina.
She would have to win 2 of the 4 out of North Carolina,
that's tough.
Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. She would have to win any 2 of those would get her over the top. So this election is so close. I think people assume because there was a fairly slight polling error in 16 and 20 toward Trump, nationally I'm talking about, that's going to happen again. I don't know about that. Remember, 2022 was a red polling error. It favored the Democrats. Not by much, but by enough, right? So they kept the Senate. Democrats kept the Senate and nearly kept the House. I have a feeling that the ground game in a close election is going to make a difference. There's no question Harris has the better ground game. Everyone acknowledges that. They've invested way more money in it. The blue wall states have voted together in 8 straight elections. 7 of those 8, they've all voted Democrat. The only exception was 2016. You saw that poll from CNN. In Nate Silver's averages, despite Trump having a pretty decent run of polling, it's leveled off now in the last few days. His gain, right? It's not. There was a clear sign of some Trump momentum a week ago. Not so much anymore. We're basically into a leveling off period. So I think that momentum, whatever he had, is kind of stopped, frozen. And in the Nate Silver averages, Harris is still ahead in Michigan and Wisconsin. That was before these CNN polls. Once they go in, so I think she's going to win Michigan and Wisconsin, and I think it's going to come down to Pennsylvania. And I just have a feeling that the ground game, the get out the vote, I don't have a great confidence in it, but I think Harris is going to hold the blue wall, and I think she's going to win Nevada. So I think Harris is going to win with 276 electoral votes. Trump will win Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. All of the swing states will be pretty close. Harris will win it. She'll win the popular vote by, I'll say, 3. I'll say Harris 50, Trump 47, everybody else, Kennedy, Jill Stein, 3% total. So that's my prediction on the presidential race. But here's the thing to watch, and this is something keep your eye on if it's close. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin do not allow mail ballots to be opened, verified, and processed prior to Election Day. So what does that mean? That means forever. It's going to take forever. So if it's close, those 2 states were very unlikely to have a call. So that's going to leave an opening, just like it did in 2020, for Trump to come in and say they're cheating, they're stealing. God only knows what's going to happen after that. But I'm just saying, based on what we can kind of predict, I think Harris will win. It'll be very close. But do I have a great deal of confidence in that prediction? No.
That's basically where I'm at. By the way, I think I also saw on Twitter, because Elon Musk was complaining about it. I think Nevada, something happened in Nevada where they can take ballots without a postmark up until like 3 days after the election. So that right there. Now, I'm not saying Nevada's going to.
By the way, in California, it's 10 days after the election, as long as it's postmarked by election day.
I think this is going to be election week. I really do. I think, and look, by saying that, I'm not even saying that things are going to be rigged or messed up, but I think these margins could be so small in a Pennsylvania, maybe North Carolina, maybe Nevada, maybe Arizona, who knows? But I think the margins are going to be so small that we're going to be in recount territory anyway. Now, so maybe somebody is declared the winner, right? But I think this thing's going to last a while, because I think there's going to be court cases no matter what, or recounts, I should say, because I think this is going to be really, really tight. If you remember, if you go back, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, whatever it was, I basically said that I thought that I can't remember how I said it, but I said this election wasn't going to be close. But what I meant by that was that I thought Kamala was going to win by a similar margin to what Biden won in 2020. So if she holds the blue wall, let's just say at the time I was thinking she wins, let's say North Carolina and Nevada. That puts her at about, I don't know, whatever that is, 290, 300-ish Electoral College votes. It's hard to not let the noise creep into your brain, though, when you see these betting odds all big time now in favor of Trump, when you see a lot of the polling favoring Trump. But I think because we've been through 8 or 9 years of polling errors, the first 2 for Trump, they were basically going against Trump. The last one going against Democrats for the red wave. I've really been cognizant of trying to feel my vibes like in my life. And what I've said this whole time, it doesn't pass the smell test to me of when Trump has started to surge in the odds and the polling the last 3 weeks. It just doesn't make sense to me that all of a sudden, like if Harris had terrible moments and Trump was great, or there was a debate, or this big thing happened, I would totally get it. But like, it was almost like over 3 weeks, it just kept ticking better for Trump each and every day. If you're going to make the argument is, okay, Kamala did all these interviews, she had all these podcasts, she didn't perform well, she's not that great. It doesn't smell right to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think this is a 50-50 election. I'll agree with you. And I think Kamala Harris wins barely now. Right now, maybe that's blue wall plus Nevada. Maybe she loses Nevada. I have no confidence in this prediction, by the way, whatsoever. I would not bet money on this. But I just feel like my vibes haven't changed, but social media has changed. And I've seen people say, and I've thought this, when I go on X, I think Donald Trump is going to win in a landslide. I heard somebody else say, when I go on TikTok, I think the Democrats are going to win. I'm not on TikTok, so I have no idea. I have no idea what's going on there. But like, we shouldn't our perception shouldn't change so much based on the social media that we consume. And to me, nothing has really changed in my life, but everything has gone towards Trump the last 3 weeks. It doesn't make sense to me. And that's why I'm going to say Harris wins. Super, super close election. I have no confidence in saying that. It would not surprise me if Donald Trump won. That's just how I actually feel.
Yeah.
But I do think Kamala is going to pull this out.
I do too. And I'm starting to be a little more confident in that prediction. I really didn't come to that conclusion until the last few days, but I'm starting to be a little more confident in it. I'm not super confident, but I'm comfortable going on record that she will win. And it's not just because of the get out the vote. It's not just because Trump's polling advantage recently is kind of leveled off. I think there's another factor too. I just don't. In a lot of the polling, they break it down by demographics, right? Those are very small sample sizes because you're only polling 2,000 people. So out of that, let's say you have, I don't know, 50 that are 100 that are African American. You're now making extrapolations about the black vote based on that small sample, right? That's why you never trust what they call the crosstabs of individual polls. But in the ones where Trump does better in those polls, he tends to get really high percentages of black votes and Hispanic votes. And I'm just going to be, I do not think that will happen. Like, he'll do better probably slightly than he did in 2020 and better than Republicans historically do. But I just don't think Trump's going to get 15 to 20% of the black vote. I don't believe it. I know there's a lot of younger black men who have said they're going to vote for him, but I even saw a poll the other day that they're starting to come home to Harris. I think at the end of the day, Harris is going to get 85+% of the black vote. I think Trump will not hit the 15% mark. I don't think he'll hit 20. And the same thing with Hispanics. I just do some of these polls that have Harris winning Hispanics like 52-48. I don't believe it. I do not believe it. I think at the end of the day, and it's not just because of this, kill Tony joke or the threat of, deporting grandma. I mean, there was a great CBS News piece the other day about what it might look like if you really deported people. I mean, there are 4 million children in this country who are American citizens who have parents who are not here legally. Think about that. Are we going to deport the parents of and the reason I say that is because I think enough people in the Hispanic community, I think, kind of understand what that would really mean at a gut level, that I just don't believe that Trump is going to beat George W. Bush 2004 with Hispanics. I think that was the last Republican to win the Hispanic vote or come close. So I think Hispanics are going to come home in a pretty strong number for Harris. Not an overwhelming majority, but enough. And that's why I believe she will eke out a victory, albeit extremely, extremely close. I also want to give my predictions for as a political nerd, I'll go on record with the House and Senate. I think Republicans win the Senate. I think they pick up 3 seats. Obviously, they're going to pick up West Virginia, where Manchin is retiring. That's a given. I think they're going to beat John Tester in Montana with Tim Sheehy. Sheehy's been leading in the polls. And I think the closest Senate race, I think, will be in Ohio, where Moreno, the businessman, the Republican, I think will edge out Sherrod Brown. Brown's a really good candidate, longtime Democrat, but Ohio's probably going to go to Trump by 8-9 points. I think it's just too much for him to overcome. And I think Republicans hold on by the skin of their teeth in Texas, where I think Ted Cruz will barely survive a challenge from Colin Allred, the congressman, thanks to Donald Trump, winning that race in Texas by, again, 6, 7, 8 points. And I think Rick Scott will barely survive in Florida too. So I have Republicans 50. That would be a gain of 3 for Republicans. So I think Republicans will win this Senate. They'll have 52 seats. And I think the House will flip the other way. I think the House will flip the Democrats. Democrats need a net gain of 5 seats. There's a lot of races where Republicans are defending Biden won seats in California, New York, districts where Biden won in 2020. I think Democrats will flip enough of those seats. So I'll say Democrats pick up 8 seats in the House, enough to get the majority. So I think you'll have an election where the House will flip from Republican to Democrat. The Senate will flip from Democrat to Republican, and the presidency will stay the same. So which would be a pretty interesting result, right? If you have both houses of Congress switch from one party to the other. You don't usually see that. I think that's going to happen this year. But again, just because we are such a closely divided country, and that could only happen if the election is really close, and I think it's going to be.
See, we agree too much because I agree with both things you just said. I'm just wondering, could Josh Hawley get taken down here by Lucas
No,
Kuntz?
no
The last
chance.
I saw a
No
poll, I
chance.
know it's just we can
I
get into
I
Hawley
I wish that
another
could
day.
happen, but
Lucas Kuntz, this guy is a veteran, right? He's just so normal, but he's a Democrat in Missouri. He's such the better candidate, but he's running in Missouri where whatever the advantage is going to be for Trump plus whatever 18. So he's probably not going to win. But Lucas Kuntz is a really good candidate. Okay, I didn't bring this up a couple minutes ago when I was basically talking about how I don't feel like the betting odds match the vibes. And this was another part of it was the House control. So Eric, we've done this show for like 10 months now. We'd always show this election betting odds, right? And we'd always talk about the presidency, but they also always had the House control. So right now, it's basically 54% that the Republicans are going to take control of the House. That number was like 64, 65% for Democrats back in August. It was 62 ish just like 3, 4 weeks ago. That's what doesn't make sense to me right there. That means you got everything wrong. That means you got basically like the country's vibes on red or blue. That means you were totally off. I understand if people just said, you know what, Kamala is not a charismatic candidate. I don't love Trump, but I think he's better on a lot of issues. I understand that. But for the betting odds to totally flip to Republicans for the presidency, and then also the House to flip from like 62 to 64% that Democrats would take control to now 54% Republicans, that's a huge, huge flip. Like that doesn't make sense to me, Eric, right? Because that is now races all across the country. To me, that means you just got everything wrong. Like, how are you so wrong on the odds 2 months ago and just 3, 4 weeks ago? That's where to me that doesn't pass the smell test.
yeah, look, I partially agree with you. I think the election betting markets have a lot of problems that have been uncovered in the last few months by some reporting, including potentially steering people to maybe vote for Trump or encouraging people to bet, quote unquote, for Trump. But I do think it does make sense that they would move together. That makes sense. And the reason is because split ticket voting Republican for president, Democrat for Congress or Senate, that has decreased dramatically over the last few years, last 20 years, 30 years, and in particular in the Trump era. And so now that's why these Senate Democratic candidates are pretty much cooked in Montana and maybe in Ohio. It's just so hard to overcome as a senator or congressman winning in a state that your party does not do well at the presidential level. It's almost impossible. There are very few left. It's a dying breed, right? Red states have basically all red senators. Blue states have basically all Democrat senators. That's just the way. There are a few exceptions around the country, and I think some of them are going to lose on Tuesday, some of those exceptions. So that part is not weird to me because let's say that, like if you just told me nothing other than the popular vote is within a point one way or the other, I would say, Republicans are going to win the House because the popular vote correlates pretty highly to what the national popular vote for Congress will be. So if Trump can break even in the popular vote or even win it, then I think it's very strong likelihood that is enough to get Republicans over the top in these really competitive close districts. On the other hand, if you told me Harris wins the popular vote by 4 or 5, I would say, well, the Democrats are going to flip the House, right? Now, if you get in that 2-3 area, that where it looks like we are, where Harris has maybe a lead between 1 or 2 points, 3 points, that's when you get in the gray area where the House is probably 50-50. And the reason is because, yes, the individual races matter in these districts. The candidates matter, their campaign matters. But what matters almost as much, maybe even more, is what the people in that district are going to vote for at the presidential level.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate that I have no confidence in my prediction. And I'll say this, maybe he's watching. I have a friend named Dave, and that's his real name. I'm not going to say his last name, but he's the one guy in my group of friends when we do sports betting. He's the one guy that consistently wins. And I'm talking about, I've known this dude since 2000. So we're talking 24 years. it's one of those things, Eric, like if you're betting with your friends, if that one guy is on the other side of you, you're like, ooh, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, he likes Georgia. Oh, now, man, because like he always wins. And he's really smart. He's a finance banking guy. He's very analytical. And like, he's one of my friends that like when he says something, it really matters. Do you know what I'm saying? Like he
Mhm.
just is very perceptive. He gets it. And he and I were texting the other day. It might have been 10 days ago. But he said, he goes, Charlie, I'll bet you $100 Trump wins. And when he did that,
Ooh.
I go, man, like coming from him, like I might make that bet versus somebody else. I actually bet my other friend. Now I'm going off on a tangent. I bet my other friend that Trump would win the nomination like 2 years ago. My buddy thought it was going to be DeSantis. I was like, no, it's going to be Trump. I won $100 off that. If it had been like any other friend, I probably would have taken that bet. Because it was my buddy Dave, who's always right on these things, I was like, no, I can't bet. But I go, why? Because he's not just saying that. And he
Right.
just goes, it feels like 2016. And he's not a partisan, by the way. Like he's a very
Yeah.
moderate, reasonable person. Like he is somebody who would bet Democrat or vote Democrat, Republican. He's not like really tied to one party. And he just goes, Charlie, it feels like 2016. And, at the end of the day, if Trump wins, you can talk about a lot of different things, but I think at the end of the day, it'll just be because it's hard for people to get by. Even though prices are
Yeah.
coming down. Look, man, I know grocery prices are coming down, but insurance is not. I
Oh, yeah.
mentioned the HOA fees, which would affect you if you're a renter. They're going to jack your rent up, right? If you own that home, you're paying so much more for taxes, for insurance. If you need any work done on your house, it costs a ton. Still going out to eat is super expensive. So, and I get it. I'm not a Trump guy, but at the end of the day, if people are like, I'm struggling to get by, I didn't struggle to get by during the Trump administration. I had a family member say that to me. They go, I never
Yeah.
had to live paycheck to paycheck when Trump was in office. And I didn't really want to get into like the ins and outs of it, but like I understand that argument.
Yeah, I do too. There are counter arguments to that, which we discussed, but I understand it. But I think what you're getting at is the difference between the rate of inflation and prices.
Yeah.
Inflation, the rate of inflation is way down, back basically to where it has always been, to a normal low rate. That's a success with doing that without a recession. But that doesn't mean prices are going down on average. They're never going down unless our economy hits a bad recession. Prices are going to continue to slightly rise across the economy. And those prices are locked in. The big swing up we've had over the last 3 years, they are locked in. And I think that is one of the important distinctions. As much as that matters, and I do think it matters, I think at a more base level, I just have a gut, and this is just a gut feeling, that if Trump wins, it will be primarily because of immigration. I just think people
Okay. Yeah.
saw the border and what was happening and the chaos. And look, let's be honest, there's some nativism involved in that too. There just is. There are some people who don't like the way that the country is changing. They don't like, they blame immigrants for things. But even if you are pro-immigrant, you could look at the border under Biden up until the last few months when they actually started to do things and say, man, it was just a disaster. It just wasn't fair. It wasn't a fair system. And people, that just doesn't sit well with people. And they will, if you promise to fix that and make that system better, as Trump has done, people will overlook a lot of other things. And the other thing too is what I said earlier. Maybe the biggest factor, if Democrats lose, is Biden putting them in a terrible position. Like maybe, like Kamala Harris, I think has done remarkably well, considering she was thrown into this 80 days or whatever it was before the election and basically had to build a campaign from scratch. I think she has done remarkably well. I think she has shown herself to be the superior candidate to Donald Trump, which is pretty remarkable given she had basically no run-up and he's been running for president or been the president for a decade. But I think she would have been even better had she went through a competitive, contested primary where she got those reps, those tough interviews, those debates with other Democrats attacking her, and get those skills of attack and being attacked. It's just different when you're running for president. And that's if she won. If she didn't win, that would mean another candidate killed it. That would mean a Josh Shapiro or Gavin Newsom or somebody beat the incumbent vice president who probably would have been endorsed by Biden. And that means they really earned it. And they were the strongest candidate and would have given Democrats the best chance to win. And because Biden wouldn't allow that to happen because he stubbornly hung on, I think if Democrats lose, especially if it's really close, you could just argue that single decision is what cost them the election. I think that would be a fair argument to make.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to say I don't care who wins the election because that's not the right way to say this. I've said 5 million times now. I don't even think Donald Trump should have been able to run because of trying to overturn the election. That's why months ago, you and I were both on the same page of whether it's Haley or DeSantis, like just put a normal Republican in there that doesn't have the negatives of Donald Trump. But just as somebody who's been more neutral on this than I've ever been in my life, meaning I'm just not tied to one candidate where I'm really passionate about that candidate. I mean, I can make a great case for why both of these candidates or parties deserve to lose, right? And like whoever loses, it's going to be kind of obvious, right? Like, again, if Trump loses, okay, you tried to overturn the election. That was a red line for a lot of people. Or you can go to Roe v. Wade. You can go just to insane comments, whatever it is. If Kamala loses, you can say you guys were absolutely terrible on immigration. And at the end there, Joe Biden, I mean, it was a steep decline. I understand. Joe Biden outperformed the midterms. I don't think Democrats at first thought he was going to run 2 terms. I think he did so well in the midterms. They said, let's roll him out there. He fell off a cliff. It put Democrats in a really bad spot. Their strategy was to coalesce around Kamala Harris. If she wins, then that strategy worked. But if she doesn't win, then what you said is, you know what? Josh Shapiro might be a superstar. I think we're in agreement on that. Josh Shapiro probably would have won that mini primary. He probably would have just impressed the hell out of everybody. That's what I think. I don't think Kamala Harris would have won a true primary. That's just my opinion. And so if she loses, there are just so many obvious things to point to of why both these candidates could lose. And in a way, like I don't feel sorry for either of them if and when they lose.
Well, the other thing too is I think perhaps the biggest strategic blunder Harris made, which may not matter, is not picking Shapiro. Like you had him there.
Yes.
And look, Walz has not been great. I mean, the waffling about the military record, I think it's overblown that he's been like terrible. I mean, he does have appeal and he is good on the stump, but he has not shown himself to be a difference maker as most vice presidents aren't. And now he's roughly as popular as J.D. Vance. And remember all the shit everybody, including us, were giving Vance at the beginning with the childless cat lady comments and everything. Now Walz is basically as popular as him, which means to say, no real advantage. I think Shapiro would have been better, just a lot better than Walz.
Yes.
But even more importantly, he's the sitting governor, a popular sitting governor of probably the most important state, maybe the state that decides it. So in that rare event that I'm thinking is going to happen where the election comes down to Pennsylvania, and I think there's a decent chance that happens. My prediction is it will happen. Then, and you lose it by 20, 30, 40, 50,000 votes. That decision all of a sudden goes, I gave my list of reasons. I would say Biden screwing the party is the number one reason if they lose. Immigration is number 2. Price is the last 3 years is number 3. And then not picking Shapiro is like way down on the list. But if they lose in Pennsylvania by less than a half a point, then not picking Shapiro goes to number 1. That becomes the most important reason that they lost. And so, we'll see if that happens.
I will say that it did seem like Tim Walz won that, if you want to call it a mini primary for VP, because I'd never even freaking heard of Tim Walz. And all of a sudden, like he was out there and he was pretty impressive until they start looking into all of his records and statements and all that. It did seem like Tim Walz kind of came out of nowhere and really, really impressed. But Josh Shapiro they call him the Jewish Obama, whatever it is. Like he seems like he could be a transcendent, I don't know if that's too big of a word, but like a really legit presidential candidate. Yeah. I agree with you. And if Kamala did not choose him based on her own ego, because she would have felt like, here's this dude who's, let's be real, better than me, more likable, more charismatic than me, and he's going to be my VP. if she didn't want him kind of stealing her thunder, if that's the reason she didn't pick him and they lose by 12,000 votes in Pennsylvania, man,
That's
what
on her. Yeah.
what a freaking unforced error if that's the case.
I agree. The other thing I wanted to mention, because this is our last show before the election, first of all, everybody should vote, even if they disagree with, with us. I think we've made our opinions pretty clear, but, agree or disagree, everyone should vote. But also, let's all, this show's called Everybody Settle Down. Let's all pump the brakes, okay? When we start hearing, because it's going to come, especially if Trump is behind, you're going to start hearing all of these crazy conspiracy theories about, voting machine switching votes. God only knows what they'll come up with. I mean, most of the stuff in 2020 was just laughable. Like, they're going to talk about dead people voting or people stuffing ballot boxes. Like, just let's everybody take a deep breath. I know this is too much to ask for, and let's wait to see actual evidence. What evidence do they have of anything like this happening before we start posting about it on social media, or God forbid, going to the streets, going to election offices with mobs? I'm hoping that stuff doesn't happen, but it's in play.
No, it
is in play. I mean, there was a mob at Michigan in 2020 when they were trying to certify election. Now, they didn't commit, they were held at bay. The authorities were there. I think the police will be ready at a lot of these places, but it's not out of the question we see some isolated violence. I hope to God that doesn't happen. I hope we all get through this together. Try not to believe everything you see right away without evidence. We've already seen the court cases. They're already coming. These are small ball court cases. Like today, the Supreme Court ruled that Virginia had the right to purge 1,600 people off its voter rolls, which is a tiny fraction of people in a state that's not even a swing state. But what you're seeing is these lawyers are already in place. They're well paid. They're very smart, and they're there for a reason, right? They're, especially on the Trump side, they're there to find some shit. And so they're going to go looking for it, even if it's there or not. And I just hope cooler heads prevail, because I have zero confidence that Donald Trump will be one of those cooler heads if he loses, or if he's even losing. He will try to declare victory. He will do everything he can to stoke people to try to overturn a result that he doesn't like. He's already starting to do it with the post I read earlier about cheating in Pennsylvania that is not happening. So I have no confidence that he will do it. And I have no confidence that J.D. Vance will do it. And I have no confidence that most of the Republican establishment will do it. But I hope there are enough reasonable people that if he is losing can constrain him. Just like I hope that there are reasonable people in his administration who can contain him if he wins. Because I think, that's kind of the best hope, I think, if he is able to win the election.
I know you got to go here, but I think it's going to get ugly. I hate to say that, and I don't want it to happen, but you mentioned earlier, you said what, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, they can't open up the mail-in ballots. Now, look,
those are the two to watch.
Okay.
I think, so and I just want to be clear on this. I think they might be able to open them, but they can't have them ready to be processed until election morning.
Right.
And the reason that matters is Florida is a bigger state than Pennsylvania, but they will have their result that night because all of their mail-in ballots are opened, verified, sorted, and ready to be put in the machine starting on election morning.
Right.
That's the difference.
Right. And so what I'm saying is, even though I think Republicans are starting to early vote, it's not going to be the same huge disparity as it was in 2020 during COVID. But I do think it's going to be very similar, where whether Trump wins or loses, Trump is going to be winning at a lot of these stages until I think these vote by mail early votes are in there. And again, that's just ripe for, it's rigged. If this happens again where Trump is ahead in all these states, and then in the middle of the night or the next day, all of a sudden he loses the blue wall states by 30,000 votes, and it's because these votes that were counted at the end, it's just ripe for basically trying to do 2020 all over again.
Absolutely. And they'll exploit that. And by the way, in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, it was Republicans in the state legislature because those are divided governments. Democrats do not have full control, even though they have the governorship in both of those states. It was the Republicans that blocked Pennsylvania and Wisconsin from being able to do that. Michigan, all blue in their state government, they switched. They are now
Mhm.
like Florida. They are able to process the vote. So we'll probably get a pretty quick result in Michigan. Now, the one factor, the two factors working in favor of it not being like 2020 is number one, the total volume of mail votes should be
Right.
significantly lower. So there won't be as many mail ballots as there were in 2020. So that will make it go a little more quickly. And also the disparity in those mail ballots
Right.
won't be as big because, as you mentioned, Republicans have smartly begun to embrace mail voting and early voting. So the margins are not going to be as massive when the mail voting comes in toward Democrats as they were in 2020. So those things give me, a little bit of hope that it will still take a while, but it will be more quick. It will go more quickly and more smoothly than 2020.
There you go. Let's end on that. Everybody settle down. We'll be back next week. I'll be traveling. I'll be near Eric in the LA area actually on election day. So we'll get something, we'll do something next week. We got to figure out when there's a result, if there's a result, if the world ends, if there's civil war, we will discuss it.
I was joking on my other podcast with my friend Brian that we did last night that was our last show before the election. I said our next show will be coming to you live from our underground bunkers or like a treehouse in Cambodia or something. Hopefully we're all alive and well.
Fingers crossed, buddy. All right. We'll see you. Thanks, everybody. Please comment, like, subscribe, and we will see you next week. Thanks for joining the stream. Appreciate it. Love you all. End stream.